Well, I just did a show. Haven't done a show in a little while. I just did a show a few hours ago. There's a lot of news developing. Talking points that we've been making for close to a decade now are exploding on the scene by the governor, by the news, by other people, Trump himself. I've been getting unlimited phone calls. I just got off a phone call for doing this. We've received about 500 new email submissions, so it's going nuts. I can't respond to everything. If you're trying to get a hold of me, please keep trying. I'm doing my best to respond to everybody. One person I had to talk to, though, was John Drake. And here's why, because in the last few days, I've been getting some phone calls and text messages, and people have seen what I've done, and they were cool with me, but they weren't exactly on board with Calexit. And in the last few days, they're like, oh, wow. So, John, what have you seen in the last few days? Please introduce yourself, 30 seconds to a minute, your California background, and then what have you seen in the last few days, and how does it make you feel?
Yeah, I'm John. I have been involved in politics for the last 3, 4 years, like in official capacity. I've always enjoyed the game. It's really fun for me. But I will say, I think my background on this is that I love California. California is my home. It is the state I identify with the most, and so I always want to see California. Do the best it can, and I want to see it thrive. And so whatever people in California want, I want to see happen. And I've been, I guess, involved with Marcus for the last, I want to say, 2, 3 years. And while I'm not an open secessionist, I've never claimed that title. Again,
Fair.
it's whatever Californians want. I want to see, whatever Californians want happen in the best possible way. But I do care about California, and so seeing what's come to light with all these backwards immigration policies and enforcements and these trampling of individual rights, I've seen this huge push right now. Whether it's on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, it's we want out, screw the union. And so I was noticing this huge uptick, especially among younger people. And so I decided to reach out to Marcus and just like let him know, hey, this is the fervor that's going on right now. And yeah, I think that kind of explains why I'm here.
You sent me two different TikTok videos. One was on Newsom saying we'll cut federal funds, and then the other was someone saying California should be independent. I've never met that person before. They just made that video. It's already blowing up with tons of views. So what you're saying is you've noticed an uptick in California nationalism, let's call it. Maybe they're
Yeah.
full-blown secession, maybe they're not, but they're saying things like, I want to do my own thing and I don't want to pay federal taxes, which, as I love to explain, is secession talk, whether or not people recognize it as such.
Yeah. I will be the first to say I am a California national. So I don't care what happens in other states. I don't care what happens in Arkansas or Mississippi or Florida. Those are not my states. Those are not my people. I'm sorry to break it to people who live there, but what happens in your state does not matter to me because I care about what happens here. These are my people. This is my culture. This is uh, uh, the place I have lived the majority of my life, and so I want to see whatever happens out here happen to the best possible conclusion. And so seeing the pain and seeing the suffering that so many people in our communities are experiencing right now, I feel for them, and I want to and I want to support them the best way I can.
Um, so I just found out about this. That's the thing. I'm really well studied on this, but the news is happening so fast I can't keep up. So we'll just try to do a little quick. Trump was going to cut funding for California, and then Newsom said, "Well, then I will stop paying federal taxes," which is you're not technically supposed to do that, but he did it. A lot of people are supporting that. And it seemed to be they were going to have a squabble, white paperwork squabble, but then it got a little bit more heated. There was a protest against ICE in Los Angeles. It's going on for a few days. They're using tear gas, etc. And then Donald Trump says he's going to nationalize the National Guard and send them in over the will of the California governor, the California public, and against California people, which is pretty extreme. Added into that, Pete Hegseth said that he would deploy the Marines, which has never happened before. I think you got to go back to Little Rock, Arkansas, but even that was the National Guard. I'm not sure about combat troops being deployed against Californians. I'd also want to point out that Pete Hegseth, and I've been saying this for months, no one picked up on it. Pete Hegseth said during his confirmation hearing in front of the U.S. Senate, "Will you gun down protesters?" I refuse to answer. That's the guy who's now saying, I want to send in the Marines. Let's be clear. The guy who's saying, I want to send in the Marines on Californians is the same guy. This has never happened before. Said, I refuse to answer the question on if I will execute American citizens, Californians, if given the order, would not say it. I expletive you not. I've been pointing this out to people and they go, oh, that's just weird. That's just weird. He said that. Okay. We're here now. We're here now. He's saying it here. He's going to deploy it. If you thought that wasn't bad enough, John just pointed this out to me. Now we have the Director of Homeland Security saying he will arrest the governor of California. He's going to arrest and imprison the governor of California because how dare you say people should protest? They're standing in the way of our ICE raids. And so therefore you are criminal and have to be arrested. So we went from, I don't want to fund your budget, California, because you protect transgender people. Okay, well, then we're a donor state. We'll cut off funds. To we're going to protest. We'll all send in the National Guard. We'll all send in the Marines. We'll all send in somebody who's not against shooting protesters. Oh, yeah? Well, and if that's not good enough, we'll start arresting your governor and the mayor of the largest city in California. Tell me, John, you studied politics. You've been around for a while. Does this strike you as everything's working out just fine?
No, it doesn't. It does not strike me out as everything is just fine or hunky dory or any of that. I think what it really shows right now is that the federal government is really grasping at whatever they can because I think they realize the situation that they're in. That right now, they're really trying to enforce immigration policy on a state that doesn't want it to be enforced, and we're sort of now heading into territory that that we have never headed into before, where the federal government is trying to overreach way further than what even Republicans used to advocate for about 10 years ago. I think that's what's so shocking about this whole thing is that I'm very left wing. We can admit that. I'm a very left wing person, and I'm saying this is overreach. And if I'm saying that, I think we should really be wary about the direction we're going into. Yeah.
I just wanted to have John on because John's known me for a while. A lot of people have known me and they know what I do. And they've go, that's kind of radical. And they were cool with me doing my thing and we could have debates and we could pleasantly disagree. And you've always been really cool with that. What's happened is that in the last few days, I've gotten a lot of phone calls from people like you. Just, what the hell? What the hell? And people are calling me because they know damn well why they're calling me. I'm the guy that's been saying this for years. I was saying the federal system can't protect you. I was saying this is America. You're not going to recognize this place. They don't see you as fellow Americans. They're going to start being okay with things that you're not okay with. And it's not just a cultural difference. It will have real impacts on you, financial and otherwise. Now we're seeing it. The news is admitting we're a donor state. It's admitting that this is ridiculous for us to have funding cut. It's admitting that the federal government can just take over the military and there's nothing we can do about it.
I would like to say something because as someone who's not secessionist, I love the union. I think while I respect California sovereignty and the nationalism that comes with California nationalism, where I'm proud of my state, I'm also someone who recognizes the bigger impacts this means if the federal government wants to push this on all of the other states. I mean, for example, saying Newsom coming out and saying, well, we'll withhold federal funds from the government. I'm aware that that is an illegal statement. You can't just do that in California or any state for that matter. But there are real ramifications to the legal workarounds. And so, for example, do you mind if I talk about this?
No, yeah.
So, in the United States, there's a supremacy clause. The supremacy clause is all about you cannot try and, to put it in plain, simple terms, become bigger than the federal government. You can't just ignore their laws. You can't just do any of that, or your laws cannot trump federal laws. You just can't. But one thing that the federal government has been pushing, or one thing that the Constitution and the Supreme Court has been pushing over the last 40 years, has been this anti-commandeering narrative. And this anti-commandeering narrative basically states that the federal government cannot compel states to use their resources to enforce federal policy or federal laws or
Right.
mandates. And these sorts of laws have been the driving factor for a lot of red states and and even moderate states, depending on where you're living, to skirt and ignore a lot of federal policies that they see as either unconstitutional, unconscionable, or politically bad for themselves. And in the most recent instance, it was Murphy versus the NCAA in 2018, where the Supreme Court reaffirmed, and they said, and I quote, "The Constitution confers upon Congress the power to regulate individuals and not states." And that has been the sort of precedent that all these states have been able to function under. It's what allows the state of Texas to not work with the ATF when they see it as um, encroaching on religious liberty or individual rights or whatever. It allows Oklahoma to skirt EPA mandates. It allows Florida to not enforce abortion bill protection. And so if the federal government decides to come in and says, well, it's fine that you don't it's fine that, well, I'm going to say it this way. If California wants to withhold federal funds, they legally can't do that. But what they can do is that they can tell states, or they can't tell anyone to not pay taxes. But what they can do is that they can tell their state organizations, their police agencies, their court registries, everything, that we're not going to enforce federal taxation. We're not going to assist federal law enforcement in arresting people who choose not to pay their federal taxes. They can do that legally. But if the Supreme Court decides to rule and says, "Hey, we're going to mandate that that your resources go to enforcing IRS taxation. It goes into enforcing the arrests and facilitating the arrests of people who choose not to pay federal taxes," then what you're going to do is you're going to set up a precedent where there's a chain reaction that starts hurting the red states and their precedents.
Mm,
They've been relying on these
mm.
precedents for the past 40 years to be able to get away with not enforcing federal gun background checks. They've like these are the substantive issues, and I don't think they're quite realizing this right now because they're just saying California bad and Governor Newsom horrible, and immigrants scary.
Yeah.
So this is where we're at now, and the reaction that's going to come from this is going to really determine not just the state of California and whether or not it's in a weaker position or a stronger position, but it's also going to challenge the precedents that allow red states to exist in the capacities that they exist when it comes to ignoring federal laws.
If the law is applied fairly.
If the law is applied fairly.
That's my response to that. And we're living at a time where Donald Trump has publicly introduced the idea of different policies for red or blue states. He did that during his first term. He's followed up with his second. No one in the Republican Party criticized him for that. I'm not saying the Dems didn't do it. Biden did a little bit of that, but he never announced it. So we have a time where Trump's saying, I'm not going to enforce the same rules against the blue states as the red. So yes, if somebody was doing an equal application of the law, totally agree with you. We're talking about Trump. It's okay to target us. The news has been talking about how it really looks like Trump's singling out California, and that's highly unusual. And the step of I'm going to federalize your National Guard over your will, you really haven't seen that since Little Rock 1957. You got to go back close to 80 years to find something like this. Additionally, his level of hate focused on us has been well documented. The other problem is that, unfortunately, while you're right, states cannot be compelled to assist with federal deals. They aren't exactly able to make sure that their local agencies follow state will. So, for example, in 2006 to 2019, California said, we're going to stop Trump. We're going to protect undocumented immigrants. My grandfather, my abuelito, came here illegally, so I'm very sensitive to the topic. But California said we're going to protect all these undocumented immigrants, and we're not going to work with the federal government, and we're not going to help them arrest people. Okay, 60% of the local law enforcement in California decided to not go with what California said and do what the Fed said. And there was nothing California could do against it. So while California can direct its agencies to not work with the feds, they don't exactly have the ability to stop their agencies from saying, I'll just ignore you and work with the feds anyways.
Well, I'm going to push back on this because California
Well, that's a fact, though. So
I know. I agree with you. But I'm going to say, in no feasible way, if 20 million Californians decided not to pay taxes this year, would the federal government be able to enforce that?
True.
There is no, without going bankrupt.
True.
There is no feasible way that that the federal government would be able to do anything because California can say, look, we're not going to facilitate their court hearings. We're not going to facilitate. We're not going to allow state institutions to process the paperwork. As long as you're not physically barring these agents or these law enforcement entities from going into buildings to do that paperwork, you're in the clear for the most part in terms of being an absolute hindrance to the federal government. That's 100% allowed.
Sure.
And so if you have 20 million Californians get up next week and say, you know what, I'm not going to pay taxes. I mean, what are they going to do? Arrest 20 million people? They'll have to build more prisons.
No, but they might be able to arrest 100 to 200,000 people. And that's what I was pointing out with the undocumented immigrants is that California took this big stance of, we're going to protect all these people. You won't be able to do anything. We're going to stand up to you. And basically 60% of their law enforcement agents didn't go with it and work with the feds. I mean, they didn't really protect undocumented immigrants. They protected maybe 40% of them. Over 2/3 were not when it actually got, after all the talk, they didn't stop them on unlimited detention. They didn't stop them from dying in unlimited detention. They didn't stop the construction of the wall. They didn't punish any companies working for the wall. They couldn't actually stop Trump on taking over the sea and the airs and selling off property. They couldn't stop Trump from taking away healthcare from undocumented. I mean, people died and the cops were cool with it. So until California is fully independent, it does not actually have full control over a lot of those things. We saw a lot of people get screwed over after big talk. I was at the California
I think
Convention.
you're equating, and this is where I'm going to chime in. I think you're equating Democrat willpower with what can happen if you have the right people in power. I mean that's
Sure.
the whole thing. You don't
That's
need
fair.
you don't
That's
need secession in order to enforce that. You need someone with a conscience and a will to do it. Keep in mind, right now, as the California Democratic Party exists, and I will criticize them. I have in the past. I was a huge criticizer of Biden staying in for as long as he was, even though that cost me an election. Whatever. I'm gonna say, the California Democratic Party being connected to the National Democratic Party, that's what puts it in a weak position to be able to go up against what are typically American democratic institutions, because it cannot look radical. If it looks too radical, it will never win a national election.
That's fair. That's fair, but it still doesn't take away the fact that Trump can federalize things like he's doing with the National Guard over the will of the people. Trump can force federal local law enforcement to not work with California and work with the federal government. We weren't able to protect undocumented last time. Why do we think we're going to be able to do so well this time? I mean, they still have that federal arm that squashes anything underneath it. That's my point. Certainly, there could be more aggressive pushback force.
I think you jumped to the conclusion. Well, because of that, we need to succeed. We need to secede. My conclusion is we need a whole new party. I'm focused. Yeah. I'm focused on a lot of domestic politics when it comes to like party politics. That's where my opinions come in.
Sure.
Secession. I mean, it depends. If Californians by a majority vote to secede in this upcoming referendum, then I'll support it because I care about Californians and I support
Sure,
Californians and their will. That's all I care about.
sure.
So I recognize the inability of the establishment as it exists to get anything done that's substantive. But I also understand, like, hey, if majority of Californians say we don't want to be part of America, then fine. Then that's what we decide, and I will fight tooth and nail to see that it's done. I mean that's what I've done my entire career in politics for the last 4 years. Not a long time,
Yeah.
but it's something.
Yeah, and to get back to the first thing I asked you, it's not that radical an idea to consider maybe independence might be the option when we see the craziness going on in the streets. That was the first thing I was talking about. Does this look stable? We're going to send Marines in on you. Secretary of Defense says, I won't answer if I'm going to gun down protesters. People are saying I'll arrest the sitting governor and the sitting mayor. I mean, your response was that's not stable. It doesn't look like things are going well. So if we're in a meltdown,
I think they're overreacting because I think they know that right now what they have is a very volatile situation, and then that kind of situation causes people to do very irrational things. I'm not saying this
sure,
administration has ever been rational. I'm not saying
sure,
that. But
sure,
what we're seeing now is that we're seeing a lot of like preemptive decisions being made
sure.
that are provoking the populations because they are
Yeah,
trying so hard to quell things before they get bad, which is
yeah.
inadvertently making things worse.
Which all spells instability.
Major instability. I mean, the United States has not been a stable country since the insurrection. That's really
Thank
where
you. Thank you.
that's really when we went from a functioning democracy into not a functioning democracy because part of what makes a country a hallmark for stability is the peaceful transfer of power, and we did not have that for the first time in our history. And most republics are usually dead within 250 years, and we're around that. We're around that mark. So right now is really when we're being tested on whether or not we can survive um, uh, past that point.
Right.
And right now, it's really showing that it's having a hard time doing it. We've let demagogues take over, and we've let ineffectiveness and disinterest guide the opposition, and
Well,
it's ridiculous.
you yourself have said you've noticed an uptick in social media, people talking about this idea
Yeah, for real.
just recently. Yeah. Wow.
And it's not just in California. I'm noticing it. I'm noticing people wanting secession in Washington, in Oregon, in other states too. And I mean, I think there is a genuine discontent for the um, sheer uh, m- sheer lack of moral guidance that we're getting from the federal government when it comes
Yeah.
to giving people an easier way to live their life. I mean, we're expecting people to work harder than they've ever worked, have kids, but we're not giving them childcare. We're not giving them health care. We're not giving them stable work-life balances. We're not making
Yeah.
starting families easier, making finding housing cheaper. We're not doing any of that, but we're expecting these people to uh, have all this weight on their backs and then just kicking the can down the road
Right.
before there's any relief, and it's not sustainable.
No, it's not. Um, we're going to end it there. I wanted to say thanks for coming on and thanks for telling me about Homan. I did not know it had gotten that much worse in just a few hours. I've been struggling to keep up on the news. And yeah, things are quickly developing very fast and they seem to be going downhill at Mach 20 inside our atmosphere. So, final comments, final thoughts, John.
Where this timeline sucks, bro. That's all I gotta say. I feel bad for the kids studying AP history in 2100 because this is just an unpassable test. Like, right now, like right now, we're living in history, and it's being made, but it's also like a dark kind of history, and we're always asking ourselves, which side are we going to be on when it's all said and done? And we got to hope we're on the right side, because this is a trying time for all of us.
True. True. Okay. We'll leave it there. I'll call you in a little bit. I really appreciate you coming out.
Thank you.
Thanks, brother.